So a lot of stuff has kind of gotten in the way of me actually making this video. Zenless Zone Zero is a game I've been looking forward to since its reveal in 2022. I have played 3 of hoyoverse's major games, so it's no surprise that I'd be interested in another one. From its pretty different vibe to the action it so intends to offer, what is ZZZ like?
Buy 4, get 1 free!
Hoyoverse, or miHoYo, depending on what you want to call them, is rolling in cash. Whether it's Genshin or Star Rail, you can tell that these games get their profits funneled back into them. From these incredibly beautiful landscapes to the unique and well-animated trailers. It's clear that Hoyo has a vision and, if given the resources, will execute on it. While many can debate about the gacha aspects of the game, to me there is no doubt in my mind that Hoyo at least isn't just taking the cash and running with it. And we can't exclude Honkai Impact 3rd from this discussion either. But there's still a clear difference in production value between that game and Hoyo's 2 biggest games on the market. ZZZ seems to follow suit with this, though. It's not open world, and even its major areas aren't really as explorable as Star Rail, but what it has instead is charm. Not to say that the other 2 games don't have their own charm to them either, but unlike Hoyo's 2 current biggest games on the market, this game has tons of uniquely designed NPCs, varied special animations, and most of all, different character body models. You can probably tell most of this by just looking at general advertisement and promotional material for the game, but if you've never played a Hoyoverse game before, then this might not sound like much to you. To make it simple and sweet so that you understand, Star Rail and Genshin do have a ton of characters, but in-game they all share very similar skeletons. You have the kid skeleton, typically those are only for girls because, as we all know, baby boys aren't real. You have the middle height boy and girl, which is like the standard model for most of the characters, and you have the tall models. Zenless Zone Zero clearly goes a different route to embrace its somewhat more wacky world. You may not notice it immediately, but looking at the gallery of characters, you can easily tell that a lot of them aren't just going to be using Skeleton 1 or Skeleton 2. As of right now, it really gives them some extra character and features, and I can appreciate what they're going for here. But this is all about the allocation of resources. I don't know what exactly the budgets are for these games, but you can tell that there's a different direction they're going for with Zenless Zone Zero as opposed to Star Rail or Genshin, where Star Rail and Genshin are very hammered in about creating these various and big open landscapes. ZZZ is much more linear in that regard. So if you're expecting expansive exploration, you're in the wrong place. A majority of Zenless Zone Zero's gameplay is split between this TV world exploration and its action combat. The TV stuff is kind of like exploring a fairly simple dungeon. Sometimes you have to reach certain tiles to complete your objectives, sometimes you need to be wary of fights, and sometimes you just have to explore every nook and cranny to find what you're looking for. On a personal level, I feel like these segments are fine, I guess. Most of the time in the early game they feel pretty quick, however, as I progressed, the game began to introduce more layers to TV traversal, I mean that both figuratively and literally, and it made navigation kind of annoying. I think having this vertical element without some form of map displayed pretty clearly on the screen is a bit of a headache, even if the overall execution really isn't that bad. I imagine things will get more complex and difficult to absorb as you progress further into the game, as most of these games kind of do. I kind of hope that within a few hours it feels like you've ironed out the TV stuff and it's pretty simple and quick, snappy to complete. And as much as I want to sink more time into this game, I really don't have the time to do it right now. So I can't say for sure, but it's kind of rough to figure out if this game is going to make these TV hollows, as they're called, more complex or not, because it seems like they're trending in the direction that this is going to be, like, 50 to 60% of the main gameplay.
2, 1, 0.
So what this game really advertises is its combat, and I think that's wholly intentional. You'll find no shortage of praise from me about the combat. It just feels good. Sound design is definitely taken into account because every hit just feels right. And the moment-to-moment gameplay of parrying, dodging, and attacking is phenomenal. It's clear there's a lot of time put into making this the star of the show. Like most Hoyo games, team comps are a major player in this. The game gives you 3 characters to work with. In the beta, it starts you off with Anby, your agile hack-and-slash sword user, Billy, your eccentric cyborg gunslinger, and Nicole, your money-hungry black hole shooting boss. Having to cycle between each of them in combat to bring out the full potential of your teams winds up being pretty second nature. And when you get those slow-motion swaps and those clashing parry sound effects, this game really knows how to put on a show with their combat. And you can argue that, well, I'm just mashing a few buttons, it doesn't really feel that skillful. And, well, I guess? For the most part, that's Hoyo's games at their core. I mean, you have to remember that these are mobile games first, so the controls have to work for mobile games. And while I'd love to see their approach to a full-on AAA console or PC-focused title, that's just not what's happening here. But yes, in short, the combat is phenomenal. And while I don't have a lot of time to dig into it, it's definitely the highlight, and it's the main thing they're advertising with this game. So I kind of hope that as we progress further, this becomes the center stage, and the TV thing gets shot down to maybe 10 or 20% of the gameplay. But we'll have to see.
Yo, yo, yo! Good morning, ladies! Rise and grind.
I don't really want to touch on the gacha stuff too much. There are plenty of channels that will probably put more effort into that than I will. What I'll say for now is, yeah, if you've played Genshin or Star Rail, you shouldn't be surprised by any of this. It's a standard 90 pity 50-50 stuff. Basically, you're guaranteed a 5-star character after 90 pulls, you have a 50% chance of getting the featured character, and if you lose that 50-50, then your next 5-star is guaranteed to be the featured character. This is a staple for these games at this point. There is also, of course, the standard banner, where you are guaranteed a 5-star after your first 50 pulls, and then you get to select a standard 5-star at 300 pulls. A little bit of an optimization is that the beginner banner and the standard banner are effectively the same thing in this game. So unlike Genshin and Star Rail, where they're separate, where you did 50 pulls on the beginner banner and that doesn't carry over to the standard banner count, it does here. Then there's this 4th funny little banner for these silly marketable plushies, the Bang Boos. If I understand right, you can't use premium currency on these guys. You have to earn the pulls for them in-game. Certainly an interesting approach, but that's really the basics of the gacha system.
Something just doesn't feel right.
My main issue right now really is that the combat is not center stage. Obviously, Hoyo wants to separate this game from Honkai Impact. They want them to be 2 separate entities, where Honkai Impact really emphasizes the combat, and Zenless Zone Zero seems to be trying to partially do its own thing. I feel like the TV thing is kind of the main time sink here, and that could be okay depending on how I feel about it once I start playing the game for real. Given how much the action is featured in all the big budget trailers, I was kind of hoping for a bit more. I guess I can see it as the TV being the primary method of movement and the action being the little treats in between. But so far, each combat round has barely taken me a minute outside of a boss or 2, so it's fairly short-lived. It's not that I don't enjoy the game itself, but I'd like to see how this factors into the daily grind of the game, which again, I'm not confident that the beta will accurately represent that. Early gacha is always hard to judge on that front because these games tend to come out with a hefty load of content. The main reason I'm refraining from commenting too much heavily on specific aspects is again because this is a beta, and the final release might have things changed. And honestly, there's a lot to love with Zenless Zone Zero. The problem for me is finding time to love that stuff. Persona 5X really has been taking up most of my time. I have no intentions of putting that game down for a while either. So in the end, I really just don't have a ton of time to invest in Zenless Zone Zero right now. But even if my opinions are rather short-sighted on this game, I still am quite happy with most of its direction. The story presentation is great, and for a visual novel, it's definitely a hard step up from Honkai Impact's direction. While I do have some gripes with the TV section, it's not like they're completely devoid of fun either. They're little puzzle kind of things, and I think that in its own right is entertaining. It's just that since the combat is the thing that was so featured in all of the promotional material, even within the character trailers, you don't see the TV mode stuff that much. The combat definitely feels like it's the most polished piece of this game here, and I really hope that once we reach the late game, it does take over as the centerpiece, because the work done here deserves to be in the spotlight. But I guess we'll see with full release, because this game seemingly is coming out relatively soon. So if you want to see me talk more about this game, maybe on official release, you could leave a like on the video or subscribe to the channel, as I will be doing those things. I will also be continuing to cover Persona, JRPG, and ATLUS news in the future, so you could subscribe for that as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.